tremendous things and awesome things in this ministry that he has birthed. And so we just want to welcome you and ask you to feel free, be a part of. The way we do it is that the first 45 minutes, First Lady would share with you what God has laid on her heart. And then for the second 45 minutes, I will share with you. This part of it is interactive, where you can stop me and ask questions, and we will interact. Just quickly, though, let me just try to answer a question that was asked. I was looking at the chat, and someone asked about the burning of incense. And the scripture talk, she gave several verses where they talked about the burning of incense, and she was a bit confused. But if you look at those verses, just to give some clarification, we can't go deep into it, but just to give some clarification, it was part of the ritual when they came before God, and the priests came before God to confess the sins of the people and to do all the things that priests would have done. The incense would have been part of that whole ritual, where God says, burn incense before me. And but that was part of the Old Testament. That was part of what God, remember when Jesus Christ came, he was the ultimate sacrifice. So there's no need for the rituals of the priests anymore, because we have a high priest who is Jesus Christ, who was passed into heaven, offered all the incense and everything else. He has done that for us permanently. So there's no need for that to be done. And even in those days, it's the priests used to do it. Now, I think she also mentioned it is in Revelation. And if you look in Revelation, you would say that it's the angels who carry the incense before the Lord, the incense and the prayers of the saints that were offered up to God. Again, we don't have time to go deep into that, but it was never required of the ordinary people to come and burn incense before God. It was always the priests that did that as part of the ritual that God had required for them to come before him and offer the various sacrifices on behalf of the people. We are not required to burn incense unto God. And as First Lady was saying, the incense that people burn to ward off evil, that is unbiblical, is unscriptural. There's nowhere where God tells us to burn incense to ward off the scripture. He said, resist the devil and he will flee from you. That's what we're supposed to do. Okay, so I hope that brings a little bit of clarity to that person and the question that they asked. Okay, the burning of incense is not required of us as believers. That was part of the Old Testament, that the priests used to come, the incense and the sacrifices, all of that was part of the rituals. You can read that, back in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy. But now, in the New Testament, in the new dispensation, where Jesus Christ has become our high priest, there is no longer that requirement for us. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If you still require further clarification, then I'll be free, I'll feel free to ask me and I'll feel free to answer you. Okay, so God bless you.
Before you start, I just wanted to say that there are some scripture verses in the chat with some people's name next to them. So I just wanted to kindly remind everyone to look into the chat because there are some names next to the verses from last week. So I just a gentle reminder to look into the chat, and if you see a verse with a name next to it, remember to pull it up so that you could read it when Dr. Richards calls you.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue from where we left off last week. We were talking about the love, this thing called love, and we have been delving into it and looking at it. And last week we were asking some questions. And I want to start off this week with some questions again. And I want to start with something that somebody said in passing. They made the comment and they used an expression that I've heard many times, and I want to deal with it as we continue on this whole thing about love. Now, I don't want to repeat what the person said, but I want to ask the question based on what the person said. And the question is, how comfortable are you if your spouse, for those of us who are married, has a work husband or a work wife? How comfortable are you as a woman if your husband had a work wife? How comfortable are you, sir, if your wife had a work husband? Now, for those of you who have never heard the expression, a work husband and a work wife is somebody on your job that you get along real well with. You all, you do everything together. You might go take lunch together. Any issues, problems, that's a person you go to. You all have a real good connection. So it's as though you're married, but you're only married on the job. So they're called your work husband or your work wife. I want to find out from you, how comfortable are you as a married person? And if you're not married, tell me, think about it. How comfortable are you with a situation like that? This person says, and it's not like it's the person they're having an affair or anything like that. Huh? Everybody refers to them as that's your work husband and that's your work wife. That's a reality. So my question is, how comfortable are you with something like that?
Dr.
Let
Richard,
me hear you.
we have Sister Bernadette. Her hand is up.
Go ahead.
Hi, pleasant good night. My husband and I joke about his work wife. So the person is actually close to me as well. So I'm very comfortable. I'm very comfortable. Sometimes when I cook, I say, well, carry that for your work wife. Sometimes she cooks, she bake bread, she sends it over me. So I am quite comfortable. I'm not insecure in any way. So I'm quite comfortable.
Thank you, Sister Bernadette. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Dr. Richards, we have no hands up. I have a comment in the chat. No, Galaxy A12 says as long as boundaries are set, it's not a problem.
Okay. As long as boundaries are set. Anyone else?
Yes, Dr. Richards, we have a hand up. Sheldon, Elder Sheldon, sorry.
Yes, Elder Sheldon.
Dr. Richards, I'm kind of confused with that. Why the term work husband and work wife? Why can't it just be a friend?
And to answer that, now I don't know who came up with the concept, but to answer that based on what I understand, because you do everything with this person, I mean, you have other co-workers, you have friends there, but this person is connected to you. You do everything with them on the job. This is the person who, our Sister Bernadette just says, might bring you food to eat, might bring you lunch, might take, you might go out for lunch, you lime together during break time, whatever break time you'll have, you and the person are seen together. So I suppose that's the reason why they came up with the term work husband and work wife.
I have an issue with the term in the sense that because if I am married, only one person gets the right to be called my wife, right? And that is the person that I'm legally married to. So, they say to each his own, but to me, I kind of don't think it's the right terminology for it. Because yes, I do understand that, people would have good friends on their jobs of the opposite sex, and I do understand that, right? As somebody said, once it doesn't reach to the point where, the person cross boundaries, right? Once boundaries are set, but where you have my colleagues on them referring to that person as my work wife, that to me, that is disrespectful to my wife. That's how I seen it. That is being disrespectful to my wife to be calling this person my work wife. And that's just how I see it. I could be naive or I could be thinking, but to me, it's being disrespectful to my wife.
Thank you, Elder Sheldon. Anyone else? personally. Is there anybody else?
Yes, Dr. Richards. We have no hands, but we have a comment. I'm not comfortable with that at all, Brother Adrian. And that is opening doors for other things. Why would I want to call somebody else my wife? Elder Ruth said, I agree with Elder Sheldon, and so too Sister Jamie and Sister Gina, sorry, and also Brother Adrian as well is in full agreement with Elder Sheldon.
Okay, so we have people with different views, opposing views on this. I just want to pause again if anyone else has a comment to make. Yea or nay, agree, disagree, like or don't like, yes or no? Okay, all right, so let's move on. Now, most of the questions we've been asking, really, most of it is dependent on the relationship that you have with your spouse. So sometimes we can bring those relationships to a place where they're tested by the thing that we say and do. And sometimes your relationship, the strength of your relationship is borne out by whatever situation that occurs. So it's not a one size fits all. It depends on your relationship. And as I said, your relationship with God and the relationship with your spouse. I asked this question concerning the work husband and work wife because I've heard of it several times, and it was mentioned last week, Thursday, by someone. And I thought about it again, and I'm saying, why, and it was asked tonight, why would you want to refer to somebody as your husband or your wife that is not your husband, that is not your wife? Now, again, to each his own. For example, Sister Bernadette says she doesn't have a problem with it because the person is close to her. But what if the person wasn't close to her? What if it was just somebody in your husband's office that you didn't particularly know? You may know them by name, you may know that they work there. And people are referring to that person as his work wife. Would you feel the same way? These things sometimes are seeds that when they are planted, they can reap a harvest that we don't like. And we've got to be careful. Your spouse must be respected at all times. Whatever you do, whether they are there or not, as I tell my wife, one of the things I always try to do is act as though she's always around. So any conversation I have with somebody or whatever I say to them, I ask myself, would I say that if Nicole is here? So I think about that because I want to pay respect to her, and I want people to respect her too. And I don't want, if I'm at work, when I'm no longer working full time, that somebody's referred to as my work wife, and then my true wife comes up. What happens? She comes on the job. How will she feel? What will people say? How will they refer to her? Will they respect her? Because she now might appear to be the outside woman because I have a work wife. If I have a work wife, another woman coming, that woman is, she's the outside woman. And that's not what I want for my wife. And that's not what I would think my wife would want for me. So we've got to be careful about these concepts and these things that we practice that can lead to a place where we don't want to be. And I find it very challenging to refer to somebody as my work wife. Me personally, I find it very challenging to do that. Because what am I saying? You know what the responsibilities of a wife are or husband is towards his wife? What does that mean? So what does that mean? If you know the responsibility, I'm supposed to love her, cherish her, and all these things. Am I doing that with my work wife? Is that my work wife doing what she's doing for me? And these things sometimes lead people to the place where they cross boundaries. I know somebody says, it's okay as long as they don't cross boundaries. But these things causes us to cross boundaries sometimes. They breed that. They lead into situations like that. that we've got to be careful about. Again, let me say to each his own, as in the case of Sister Burnett, she's comfortable with it. But this is not something, you know, there are rules and there are exceptions. Maybe that might be the exception to the rule. But as far as I'm concerned, the rule is you do not refer to this person as your work husband. You do not refer to this person as your work wife. In fact, there's no such a thing. We have come up as men, as human beings, with this concept of work husband and work wife. It's not scriptural, and we ought not to practice anything that is not scriptural. So I just warn you, just to be careful. Just to be careful about these things that, let me say, that the world practice, that we want to practice too. If you have a work wife, you have a work husband, your children come on the job, how does that work out? And they hear somebody referring to you as somebody's work husband, or their father's, their mother's work husband, or their father's work wife. How is that going to affect your children? What is that saying to them? That you can have two wives, one at home and one at work? So I just thought I would bring that up because it was mentioned last week. And I wanted to hear what you thought of it. And I just would advise, if this is something that we accept and practice, be careful.
Dr.
Be very,
Richard,
very, yes.
we have Elder Sheldon hand is up, and we also have some comments in the chat where we have people agreeing with what you're saying. Elder Ruth said, seems like a joke, but it's not. But it's not that. Seems like a joke, but it's not that. It's a serious thing. Or she's saying that it seems like a joke, but it's not. It's a serious thing. Sister Viola says, good night, everyone. Okay. Elder Ruth said it's easy for the enemy to use that as the person, as at the person as well. Elder Sheldon.
Yes, Dr. Richards. I just want to endorse everything that you said there, because I actually know of a situation where this happened, right? Where I was on my job a day, and there is a guy that I work with that came from another company that works with me now. And we were entering the company's warehouse. And I saw this guy that I know. Now, I didn't know that the other guy knew this person also too. So I just acknowledged him. So when I walked off, he said, you know that person? I said, yeah, I know him. He goes to church, right? I said, where you know him from? He said, well, he used to work in the same company with me. And he told me that this young man have a young lady on the job that he used to refer to as his work wife. He is married. He has somebody on the job that he refers to as his work wife and has 2 children with her.
Wow.
Right? And he is open. He said he used to say openly on the job that this is my work wife. He used to actually introduce the other woman as his wife. So much so that the people on the job thought that that was his real wife, and they didn't know that his real wife was outside. And he have 2 children with this woman.
That's where it can lead.
Right? So that is the danger of this thing. And people doesn't understand that, you know, when we doing these things, it's like what Pastor Nicole was talking about, right? We inviting spirits, we inviting the enemy to come in to our marriages, we inviting the spirit to come into we inviting the enemy to come into our lives when we do certain things like that, because the word of God said life and death is in the power of the tongue. So we have to be careful what it is we saying, right? So how could you know, knowing that you have a wife and then saying to somebody else, this is my work wife? That is demonic. That is not right. And then what is showing all of your co-workers that I have absolutely no regards for my legal wife. Right? And then you're also showing God that I have no fear for you neither. So it's just that these things is so sad.
I hear you. And that's the danger. That's it, because it can lead there. It can lead to that place. And then you see the mind works in such a way. You start thinking about this person as your work wife or your work husband. Sooner or later, something gets into your psyche that you might even stop. You might even drop the word work now. That's my wife, that's my husband. And in fact, what you do as well is that, and some people may do it, I'm just guessing, I don't know. Your wife is your wife at home, but when they get to work, this is my wife. That's what I mean by work wife. This is my wife. So everything that I would do for my wife, I want to do with this person. That's what gets into your psyche, and it gets into your heart. And you could end up like this person having children and all sorts of things happening. And what kind of signal is that sending for people who are non-believers as well, when they look at you and they know you're a Christian and you have a husband at home, you have a wife at home, and you're referring to this person as my husband and my work husband and my work wife. We got to be careful with these things. And that's why I said I wanted to bring it up, because it was mentioned last week, and it was just mentioned as though it's something acceptable. I don't know if you all heard it or mentioned it, maybe because I always had this thing, you know, when we can't find the right word, we say thing. I always had this thing with this concept of work husband and work wife. So when it was mentioned, the person was talking, it was just mentioned in passing, you know, it raised a red flag for me. It rang a bell for me. I said, no, we had to talk about this. We have to deal with this thing. All right. Again, and Sister Bernadette, this is in no way saying, you know, that you're wrong for that. If it is that you and your husband and this person, you all are close, that's one thing. I would have preferred, you know, you say good friend, your good friend, or something like that. But work husband and work wife is that has a particular connotation to it. And you know, nothing is wrong with friends. For example, I have a good friend of that, well, you all know she was here, and she's referred to as my friends, plural. All right. And it's my wife is the one who coined that. There's nothing wrong with having friendship, even with people, members of the opposite sex. But we've got to be careful, because when you say husband and wife, spouse, those things come with certain privileges that if you give those privileges to these people, you're in trouble. Yes? Okay. Anyone else? Anything else to add to this? First Lady? No?
No hands are up, Dr. Richards.
Okay.
In the chat though, we have Cheryl says we need to be careful because some women are very bold-faced. And Elder Ruth says that this is very dangerous. Adrian says opening doors that we should not. There are specifics in the Bible with regard to husbands and wives. It's not something we play with. And Jamie says a lonely, desperate woman and or man can begin to experience mania and become aggressively possessive as a result, and create tension and undue and unnecessary stress.
And you know, that is so true, because this work wife might start now to think that she's the real wife. And you know, that could be a problem, because now she wants this person is her husband. And as I said, the real wife could become the outside woman in her eyes. You're my husband. I remember we spent a lot of time at work, a lot of time. So again, just be careful. Just be careful. Yeah? So wonderful. So shall we move on? So we're talking about love. We're talking about love. I had 2 more questions to ask you, but I want to maybe I want to skip those questions for now and get into who are we supposed to love?
Dr. Richards?
Yes.
Before you go, we have Sister Kimlan. Her hand is up. And
Yes,
before
Sister
Sister Kimlan speaks, Elder Ruth says, imagine going to lunch with this person, and when you decide to go out with your wife, people want to know who is the real wife.
All that could happen. A number of scenarios can play. Yes, Sister Kimlan, go ahead.
Good night, everyone. So I have gotten a whole totally different perspective with your understanding of work wife, because when I said it last week, because when it was a fresh, yeah, it was a fresh term. Well, when I referred to it in that era and that time, it was sort of understood by your spouse that first of all, it's not somebody you really would be attracted to, but they just happen to do things, like a wife. So it to me, it was kind of like, what happened as your wife or what? It started like that when I knew it. And then it just became like, more of a sarcasm that, the people that will have your back or whatever, your work wife, your work husband. Some of them when I was working and in the flesh, my work husbands, when I was working, used to be gay guys, to be honest. So now that you all brought it forward this way, because in that season, I would not have seen it. I would not have thought of it to all the levels that it came, because back then, the person you would also sometimes too, the partner would refer to the person you're closest to in work and call it that. It wasn't even something that came from the initial person who had the work husband. I think it started when the spouse of the person saw the connection and called it that, and that's where it started. So it wasn't, I understand the depths of it now that you all brought it up, but on the surface, it wasn't, to be deemed so well that way. So you all peel a lot of layers into just the notes. So in future, it's something that I'll have to think about in that sense. But initially, it was mere innocence. It was just simply that they're just doing things like that, but not meaning that there's any connection more than that.
Yeah, well, that might have been the initial. Thank you, Sister Kimlan. That might have been the initial idea behind it, but that's not what it is now. That certainly is not what it is now, and it's a dangerous thing.
Clearly, because there's a lot of new stuff that
Yeah.
it wasn't. What it is now is not what I knew it to be when we used to say it then.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue. So we're talking about love, and we are required to love. We are commanded to love. We are told to love. But let's talk about who we are supposed to love. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 9. I want you to read that for me, please. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 9. Who has that one?
Good evening, everyone.
Aye.
The word of God say in the New King James Version, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your hearts. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes. You shall also write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates."
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It's called the Shema, something that they were supposed to repeat every day. But it goes on to say, you shall love the Lord your God. It's a command. You shall love the Lord your God. And that's the same God that we serve. And if they were commanded to love the Lord their God, and we commanded to do the same, you shall love the Lord your God, but not just love God, with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. That is the command. We are supposed to love God. And even though this command was given to Israel, because it starts off by saying, "Hear, O Israel," it really is an eternal command to the people of God. So we could very well say, I could very well say to you, as Moses said to them, hear ye, O Levirate family, the Lord our God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you're traveling a maxi, a taxi, or a bus, when you're walking, when you're going to bed, when you wake up. You shall keep them on your phones, on your tablets, on your laptops, on your computers. You can write them on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. Write them. Love the Lord your God. Teach your children to love God. You ought to love God, and you need to teach your children daily to love God. Yes, we are required to love God. Matthew 22, 36 to 38. Matthew 22, 36 to 38.
Good night, everyone.
Aye.
Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 38 says, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment.
This is the first and great. It doesn't mean the first commandment that is given. Thank you. It means it comes before all others. It's the greatest commandment, that we are supposed to love the Lord our God. There's a song that we love. Well, a lot of us love, a secular song, but it's a beautiful song. It was sung by George Benson, which starts with, I believe the children are our future, teach them well, and let them lead the way. The chorus says, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. But that's not what the scripture is saying. The scripture says the greatest love is to love the Lord your God with all your heart. And when the scripture says all, it means all. You don't love God partially. You don't love God on Sundays only. You don't love God only when things are going good, when you feel that you're being blessed. We are to love the Lord our God always, with all our heart, all our soul, all our strength. But the question is, if we are to love God, how do we love God? How does a man, and when I say man, I mean mankind, male and female, how does a man show his love towards God? I'm glad you asked that question. Let's look at John 14, 15. John chapter 14, verse 15. What does it say?
Sister Suzanne?
Well, I guess they can unmute, right? John 14, 15. I think 30 seconds gone. John 14, 15 and John 14, 24. John 14, 15 and John 14, 24.
I'll read John 14, 15, Dr. Richards. If you love me, keep my commandments.
If you love me, do what? Keep my commandments. In other words, whatever I say to you to do, you got to do it. That's how you show me that you love me. John 14, 24.
Good night, everybody. He who does not love me does not keep my words. And the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me.
Thank you. He who doesn't love me doesn't keep my words. In other words, he who loves me keeps my word. And it's not just my word, but it's the word of the Father. So how do we love God? By keeping his commandments. By keeping his commandment, by being obedient to him. That's how we show God that we love him. Not by going to church every Sunday, not by talking in tongues, not by tithing, not by all the good things that we think we do. We love God if we keep his commandments. Let's look at one last verse tonight. John 21, 15 to 17. We referred to this quite a lot.
Sure. So, when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Michelle. Jesus asked Peter, if you love me. And Peter said, yes. He said, feed my lambs. If you love me, take care of the little ones. Take care of if you love me, that's how you show me you love me, Peter. Take care of the little ones. Then he asked him a second time. And he said, yes, I love you. He said, tend my sheep. Take care of them. Look after them. Not just feed them, but make sure that they have what they need to have. Be a brother to them, well, in our instance. Take care of my sheep. Take care of the people that are mine, whatever they need. And then a third time, when he answered, he said, feed them, feed my sheep. So feed my lambs, feed my sheep, tend my lambs. In other words, if we love God, we will see about the people of God, those who are young, physically and spiritually. We will feed them by giving them spiritual food, by physical food. We will tend to them by we're taking care of their needs, whatever their needs are. And that's why this ministry that God has birthed, we feed you not just with the word, but that's why we ask for hampers for people who need, people who are in need. We are looking after those who are also in need. That's why we ask you about the school books and uniform for the young man. That's tending to the sheep. That's feeding the lambs. That's feeding the sheep. If we love God, it's not just about doing good to be seen. It's about showing God that we love him when we take care of each other. That's how you love God, by loving one another. That's why Jesus gave that new commandment. He said, love one another as I have loved you. So the first commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, with all your soul. And how do we love God? By taking care of the things of God and the people of God, one another. When we love one another, we show God that we love him. When we take care of each other, when we watch out for one another, when we have each other's back, we show God that we love him. How could you see somebody in need How could we see somebody in need and not take care of them and say we love God? It's like you going down the road and you see not mine, but one of our sons, Joshua, Jonathan, and Judah, and something is wrong with them. Maybe somehow the money to travel, they lost their money, so they're walking home and you pass in your car. You can't say you love Pastor Nicola and say our boys in need of a lift or anything and not do it and then come and say, oh, Pastor Noel, I love you. Pastor Nicola, I love you. No. And that's what God is saying. You love me, take care of those that are mine. So we are supposed to take care of each other. That's how we show God that we love him. Not with the tears flowing and the hands upraised. All that is good. That is good. But that's not an act of love. Act of love is practical. Feeding, tending. Feeding and tending. That's what we are supposed to do. So we ought to love God. And we love God by keeping his commandments, keeping his word, taking care of the lamb and taking care of the sheep. We're going to stop here for tonight. We're going to continue tomorrow night, God's willing. I just want to pause 1 second. I know we're almost there. Any questions, anybody, quickly? No? Okay, so we're going to continue tomorrow evening at the same time, 8 o'clock. Remember, we open the Zoom at 7 for those of you who are new. You can come on as early as 7 o'clock. God richly bless you.
LaGail, hand is up, Dr. Richard.
And LaGail.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. No, the Bible is written for, it's a question, a thought that came to my mind. The Bible is written for the believers. So when God says, feed my sheep and love one another, I was just wondering, is it that he's only speaking for us to love the believers? You know, when he say, feed my sheep, love your neighbor, you love yourself, well, loving one another, which is his people. So that's a question that just came. Does it mean just to love the believers, or does that also extend to the unsaved man?
All right. Well, I want you to hold that question, because what we are looking at now is who are we supposed to love? All right. Somebody's mic is open. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing some mics open. So here's what. I don't want to answer that question now, because we're going to deal with it. Because right now, what we're doing and what we'll do tomorrow night and next night is, who are we supposed to love? And the first is God. And that's how we show me love him. We're going to see tomorrow night, and we're going to answer that question in LaGail, who else we are supposed to love and how. Who we are supposed to love and how. That's what we're dealing with now. So I don't want to answer that question, because I'm going to preempt what we're going to share tomorrow night. So just remember your question, please. Okay. So First Lady, back over to you.